National News Desk, locally covered, nationally connected.
If they want to rip the American people off, then they're welcome to take this buyout, and we'll find highly competent individuals who want to fill these roles.
Federal government overhauled the Beltway cuts from the Trump administration that could face legal action.
And it's a good way for them to protect themselves because we've seen egg prices go up.
A popular chain adds an egg surcharge to their menu, a possible sign of what's to come with a massive bird flu outbreak wreaking havoc on supply.
The stock market would shut down.
Yep.
Banks couldn't do transactions.
Nope. Radios on the cell phones wouldn't work.
A looming threat to a technology you could use every day could shut down the nation's economy. So why doesn't the U.S. have a backup for GPS? We investigate. From the nation's capital, this is the National News Desk, America's News. Now, I'm Dee Dee Gatton. Thank you for joining us on this weekend edition. We take a look at the big headlines of the week and we look ahead at what to expect, starting with the 4 big stories we've been following this week. First, the acting attorney general pushing back on the DOJ, the action against FBI agents he says won't be allowed. Plus, the world reacts to Trump's plan to take over Gaza, what U.S. allies and adversaries are saying right now, and open and honest with the people of East Palestine. VP Vance's message 2 years after the disastrous train derailment. And later, recovering from deadly wildfires in California, when students in the LA area could return to class.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations.
Pam Bondi sworn in at the White House this week as the new AG. Bondi moving swiftly, signing a memo creating a weaponization working group to review criminal and civil cases brought against President Trump. The review includes cases brought by New York prosecutors, including the hush money case, which led to a Trump conviction. Bondi will also review cases brought by the Biden Justice Department. A new memo from Acting Deputy Attorney General Emil Bove says FBI employees who, quote, simply followed orders while investigating the January 6th Capitol riot are not at risk of being fired. It comes after the Justice Department demanded the FBI hand over the names of employees involved in the investigations. The memo says the only individuals who should be concerned about the review process are those who acted with, quote, corrupt or partisan intent. And new developments now, a federal judge has temporarily paused a Thursday buyout deadline for federal workers until at least Monday. As national correspondent Matt Galko reports, the courts could decide if the government downsizing efforts are even legal, while critics turn up the heat on billionaire Elon Musk, the man leading the charge.
Elon Musk, we've got a message for you. You will be fired.
Democrats are ramping up their pushback against Elon Musk and his Department of Government Efficiency. The efforts by DOJ to downsize government have led to access to multiple sensitive systems in various government agencies and an attempted purge of civilian federal workers. More than 60,000 federal employees had reportedly taken a deferred resignation offer, allowing them to resign with pay through September. A majority of the more than 2 million civilian federal workers were eligible, and they were up against a Thursday night deadline to take it or leave it and possibly face layoffs in the near future. A judge's order could now temporarily delay that decision. Many Republicans have cheered on the breakneck speed DOJ is working at.
We certainly are always concerned when there's a bull in the china shop, and that's certainly something that we're seeing here. This is going to be messy and sloppy and not pretty. But it's not going to be illegal.
But at least one Senate Republican isn't so sure about Musk's power. Maine Senator Susan Collins told reporters this week that President Trump appears to have empowered Elon Musk far beyond what I think is appropriate, and that she thought a lot of what Musk and DOJ are doing is going to end up in court. Musk's team reportedly now has access to Medicare and Medicaid records, 2 areas that had more than $100 billion of improper payments in 2023, according to the Government Accountability Office. The White House has defended the DOJ work to try and streamline the government.
We encourage federal workers in this city to accept the very generous offer. If they don't want to show up to the office, if they want to rip the American people off, then they're welcome to take this buyout, and we'll find highly competent individuals who want to fill these roles.
One potentially huge hurdle for the so-called buyouts is this. The government is currently funded through mid-March, and workers taking buyouts are being promised money through September. But that could all hinge on what Congress is willing to appropriate for the rest of the year. Reporting in Washington, I'm Matt Gelka for the National News Desk, America's News Now.
Democratic states are now vowing to challenge Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency to keep it from accessing federal systems that contain the personal data of American citizens. In a statement Thursday, a dozen attorneys general argue President Trump does not have the authority to give away such information to anyone he chooses. Meantime, the Trump administration is agreeing to limit DOJ's access to Treasury Department data to read only. That decision comes after 3 federal employees unions sued the administration, claiming the DOJ agency was given unlawful access to government payment systems. The White House is defending President Trump's plan for the U.S. to take ownership of Gaza. At a news conference with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu Tuesday, Trump proposed the U.S. would redevelop the area after Palestinians are resettled elsewhere. He did not rule out sending U.S. troops to Gaza, but he has not committed to putting boots on the ground either. Officials in the Middle East quickly criticized the plan. Egypt's foreign minister said recovery from the Israel-Hamas war should happen without Palestinians leaving the Gaza Strip. Saudi Arabia issued a statement affirming its support for a Palestinian state. For the first time, a new lawsuit alleges people died from the disastrous 2023 East Palestine, Ohio train derailment. The lawsuit includes 7 wrongful death claims against Norfolk Southern Railroad. 2 years ago this week, the derailment sent more than 1 million pounds of hazardous chemicals into the environment. The contamination compounded when 5 tankers containing toxic chemicals were vented and burned.
We're going to be honest and open with the people of East Palestine about this cleanup as it proceeds apace. I'm not saying everything is going to go perfect because it never does, but we will always be honest and transparent with the people here.
Norfolk Southern already has agreed to a $600 million class action settlement. The Los Angeles Unified School District says it's working diligently on recovery efforts following devastating wildfires. Several schools in the Pacific Palisades area were heavily damaged. The goal is to have all debris removed and appropriate environmental tests done by the end of May. If that happens, officials say the schools could potentially be open by August of this year.
We believe it is doable. However, we will not be able to do it if we do it as business as usual in the state of California. So all the waivers, the promises of expedited process approval need to come in for us to be able to live up to this timeline.
Hundreds of district employees were also impacted by the fires, with some losing their homes. The district is offering additional paid time off for those impacted. Now to a consumer alert, charging more to order eggs. Waffle House just announced all of its more than 2,000 locations will be adding a 50-cent egg surcharge to egg items on its menu because of soaring prices caused by the bird flu. But could this move force other restaurants to do the same? The National News Desk, Jeff Harris, reports.
Depending on how customers react to this new 50-cent surcharge, other restaurants could decide to opt in. But experts tell me it's not just restaurants. Certain grocery stores and individual products could also start seeing price increases and surcharges.
Osman Kazan, a business expert, believes it's not unreasonable for Waffle House to add a 50-cent surcharge to egg items on its menu, since egg prices are up over 50% since November.
For some restaurants, it's 50% of their menu includes some kind of egg.
Waffle House says the surcharge that went into effect on Monday was triggered by the bird flu, which has widely affected the chicken population, causing an egg shortage and prices to soar.
They basically want to reflect that cost of the supply cost to their customers.
Kazan says while he wouldn't be surprised if other restaurants begin adding a similar surcharge, certain items that use a large quantity of eggs might also start to see a price increase.
Pasta prices, some cakes, wherever the eggs are used as an ingredient.
Saloni Farastavastani, a marketing expert, tells us if egg prices stay where they are or go up, poultry will likely see a bump as well, both in the grocery store and possibly on menus.
If the avian flu is not controlled, then we might see even poultry prices go up.
But if the egg shortage continues, Vastani says she doesn't think these surcharges will become permanent. Instead, restaurants will be forced to adjust.
I would suspect that a lot of restaurants will also be looking at adding alternatives in their recipes to eggs.
Now, in December, the average price per dozen eggs nationwide hit $4.15, and the Department of Agriculture predicts prices will soar another 20% at some point this year. I'm Jeff Harris reporting from Washington.
Marriage rates have significantly dropped for certain groups in the last few decades, and Ivy League researchers found this decrease is specifically impacting Americans who didn't get a college degree. Emma Withrow from the Fact Check team monitoring all of these trends. Emma, so you dug into this study. What is the explanation behind these shifts?
So the researchers from Harvard, Yale, and Cornell, they analyzed data from various sources, and they found that lower marriage rates are actually linked to struggles that men without college degrees face, like higher unemployment and incarceration. These things make it harder for women without degrees to find stable partners nowadays.
All right, so on the other side of this, what about the marriage rates for women with college degrees?
Yeah, so when they looked at the data there, marriage rates for college-educated women actually haven't gone down at all, and that's really because many of these women have historically married men who don't have college degrees. They don't discriminate there, but are also financially stable. Around 1 in 4 women with college degrees marries a man without one.
Oh, that's interesting. All right, Emma, thank you. Later on, we're going to break this down a little bit further. Emma's going to look at the overall shifts in marriage rates in the recent years. Up next here, a flurry of action coming from the Trump administration in its first weeks. We discuss the big changes in a one-on-one with the White House press secretary. Plus, we're following your reaction to changes happening here in Washington, from the impact of potential tariffs on U.S. businesses to protests over DEI rollbacks. A flurry of action has been coming in daily from the new Trump White House. To keep up with it all, national correspondent Christine Frizzell sat down with the new White House press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, to talk about some of the biggest headlines so far.
Caroline, let us start with one of the many pieces of sort of breaking news, and that is the brand new Attorney General, Pam Bondi, suing the city of Chicago over its sanctuary laws. What's the strategy here, and can we expect to see more of this?
I think you can expect to see more of it, as the president signed with the swipe of his pen in an executive order upon taking office. We believe that sanctuary cities for illegal immigrants should not exist in the United States of America. We think that the United States should only be a sanctuary for law-abiding American citizens. And it is also illegal to harbor illegal criminals, illegal immigrant criminals.
I will say, though, there has been sort of a change in tone from some of these sanctuary city, mayors or even governors, for example, of New York. In terms of their support for these sanctuary laws, some of them appear to be walking it back. Yeah. Do you have specific examples of state or local officials actually preventing ICE agents from doing their jobs?
I would say the rhetoric has changed, but the laws in these places hasn't, and that's what's most important. The president is going to ensure that everybody across the board is respecting and enforcing our nation's immigration laws.
Let's talk about the executive action signed on Wednesday by President Trump, No Men in Women's Sports. What's been the reaction so far?
With President Trump's executive order and hopefully soon further legislation by Congress that the president would sign into law, this will no longer be allowed to take place. And I would add that the president's executive order has put tremendous public pressure on private organizations. In fact, just a couple of hours after this EO signing, the NCAA came out with a statement saying that they agree essentially with President Trump's new federal mandate, and they will be implementing it in their organization. It's a huge win for female athletes and women and girls across the country who are just asking for a fair shake on the playing field.
I wonder what you would say to somebody like Republican Senator Susan Collins, who thinks that Elon Musk's sort of been empowered a little bit more than she thinks is appropriate in terms of the actions that he he's taken so far as, a non-elected official.
It should come as no surprise to anybody that Elon Musk is heading up the Department of Government Efficiency. After all, President Trump campaigned on it very publicly along Elon Musk at rallies across the country, and the American people re-elected President Trump overwhelmingly. He won the popular vote after talking about this policy priority alongside Elon Musk. And I would also add that before it was Elon Musk going over and reviewing the federal government spending, it was a no-name bureaucrat sitting here in Washington, D.C. that nobody knew. There was no accountability. Money was just flying out the door. And so I would argue with Elon Musk at the helm of this project as one of the most famous people in the world, there's actually more transparency and more interest into what our federal government is spending money on. And that's a good thing for all Americans.
And that was Christine Frizzell reporting. To see her full interview with White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt, you can head to our website, thenationaldesk.com. The National News Desk team of reporters is bringing you the headlines from coast to coast. We're taking the pulse of America. And we start in Portland, Maine, where an expert warns President Trump's proposed tariffs against Canada could impact an already struggling fishermen's market.
In the last few years, Maine lobstermen have been hit with new rules and regulations aiming to preserve the population of lobsters and to protect right whales. Today, the industry could be facing another hurdle, as President Trump says he will impose 25% tariffs on Canada and Mexico. Dr. Rachel Bouvier is a USM economics professor. She says this could have a detrimental impact on the Maine economy, as Canada is one of Maine's biggest trading partners.
We probably have trade worth about $7.5 billion.
She says one reason Trump wants to raise tariffs is because we have a substantial trade deficit with Canada and many other countries. Another reason to pressure Canada into reducing the flow of immigrants into the U.S.
Imposing these tariffs is not really going to help with that trade deficit, and I think that's something that his advisors are trying to advise him on, but I don't know if that message is really getting through.
In Las Vegas, a group of protesters rallied outside a Target in opposition to the company's rollback of its DEI initiatives. One initiative pledged to increase promotions for people of color and spending with diverse suppliers. After the announcement, some now boycotting Target.
Honestly, it just feels like a slap in the face, especially to the minorities, because any minorities, not just colors, it's the LGBTQ community.
Many protesters say they will take their business elsewhere. The company's initiative started in 2019. Target said in a statement to CNN, in part, belonging for all is an essential part of our team and culture, helping fuel consumer relevance and business results. In Lincoln, Rhode Island, a man credits Chick-fil-A salads for his more than 130-pound weight loss. 34-year-old Tom Carroll said he struggled with dieting, and constant changes led to several health scares and eventually to the hospital.
I knew I never wanted to have a night like that again. It was awful, terrible. And I never wanted to put my wife in a situation like that again.
Carroll's go-to salad is the spicy Southwest salad. He has eaten one every day for the last 2 years, among other changes. Our country's GPS system could be at risk, with experts saying we have no backup. Coming up, why everything from airplanes to the stock market could grind to a halt. What would you do without GPS? I know it's a lot to think about. You may not realize, but almost every aspect of our lives now depends on the faint signals from space. National investigator Brendan Keefe discovered the U.S. has no backup for its vulnerable GPS system, and he has an ominous warning from experts who say the nation's economy hangs in the balance.
There's a looming threat on the horizon.
The impact would be enormous. A very devastating, cascading series of events.
Airplanes would be grounded.
But eventually, the power grid would stop operating.
First responders would have a hard time getting to emergencies, finding your house.
It is a $1 trillion risk that our economy is facing.
Our economy comes to a halt within a month.
Because we couldn't move data, we couldn't move people, and we couldn't move goods.
Is the government doing enough to address this?
No.
They're talking about GPS, the United States Global Positioning System.
The vulnerability of GPS, both jamming and spoofing, is a real considerable threat to the country and needs to be taken seriously.
Admiral Thad Allen chairs the nation's advisory board on position, navigation, and timing.
Our entire economy could sink if the civilian signal is compromised.
More than 24 top experts sounding the alarm about threats to the system. Until something happens, people aren't aware that there's a vulnerability.
Well, as what usually happens, you deal with the wolf that's closest to the door.
Where in the world are we? GPS brings us down to earth with precise location.
But position and navigation are only half the story. The better question is, when in the world are we? GPS is the nation's hyper-accurate clock, and without it, major systems would go out of sync or stop altogether. It's about time to realize it's about time. A failure of that timing signal from GPS could cause cascading blackouts across the nation because the plants that power your home are synced to the same GPS signal that is used to time every single trade on Wall Street. These 31 satellites, if something happens to them,
we're toast. We're toast.
Do we have a backup system for this currently in the United States?
Not a single backup.
Brad Parkinson should know. He invented GPS half a century ago for the military.
And the average citizen doesn't ever see it. They don't even know it's there. They don't realize the harm that would be done if it suddenly weren't.
The GPS signal is so faint, experts say it's easy to jam or overpower with fake coordinates.
Over 1 month, there were 41,000 Boeing, Airbus, and other aircraft that were affected by GPS spoofing.
All of a sudden, an airplane doesn't know where it is. That's a problem.
We've had cases in the maritime where the actual position of a ship is shown to be inland.
Shown to be inland?
Yes.
Russia and China both have extensive backup systems, while we have none under U.S. control.
Our adversaries know we are at risk.
Phone companies propose using cell towers as a GPS backup, one of many land-based solutions. The broadcasters have a solution to this?
Yes, we have. The solution is something that we call BPS, and that is for Broadcast Positioning System.
The National Association of Broadcasters invented a GPS backup.
The exact same timing signal that is transmitted via a GPS satellite, except we're doing it from a television tower.
The urgency is now.
It's all about timing and a signal as invisible as the threat just over the horizon. This is Brendan Keefe reporting.
Coming up next here on the National News Desk, the FDA greenlights new research. The animal the next life-saving kidneys could come from. The FDA has approved 2 company studies of pig organ transplants for those with kidney failure. 9 patients will be involved in the first trials. Over the past 3 years, 5 patients have received pig organs engineered by the companies. More than 500,000 Americans have kidney failure. And parents, your phone habits could have a direct link to the phone habits of your child. That's according to a BMC pediatric study. Adults who spend a lot of time on their phones are likely to have kids who follow suit. And those kids are more likely to see R-rated movies and play mature-rated video games. More than 10,000 12 and 13-year-olds were studied. Ahead in our next half hour, State Farm paying out millions to wildfire victims in California, how much it's planning to up rates in response. Plus, Trump cracks down on illegal border crossings, the 3 big headlines announced this week. You're watching the National News Desk, America's News Now. You can catch us live weekdays from 6 a.m. to 11 a.m. and 10 p.m. to midnight Eastern Time, and anytime online at thenationaldesk.com. We'll be right back.
The National News Desk, locally covered, nationally connected.
They've got other things that they've been using over in Afghanistan to discover tunnels in Afghanistan that could be used on the border.
Mexican cartels' use of drones threatening migrants and border agents, how the U.S. military could respond. Plus, cyber experts find a major vulnerability in China's new AI app, DeepSeek, the built-in technology that could expose you to the world. And later.
Almost half of Americans think that financial cheating is at least as bad as physical cheating.
Secret splurges and hidden mountains of debt. Which generation is most likely to commit financial infidelity? From the nation's capital, this is the National News Desk, America's News Now. I'm Dee Dee Gatton. As we come back on the air, we are taking a look at some of the top border news that came down this week. First, Guatemala's president pledging to a 40% increase in deportation flights carrying migrants from the U.S. The deal unveiled during a news conference with Secretary of State Marco Rubio. Rubio also toured a migrant detention center at the Guatemala City airport. Under the new agreement, the U.S. will pay for the migrants' return to their home countries. And a second federal judge put a pause on President Trump's birthright citizenship order. Trump wants to eliminate automatic citizenship for children born to undocumented immigrants on U.S. soil. His administration says the 14th Amendment has been interpreted incorrectly and was meant for former slaves. The Maryland judge says no court in the country has endorsed that interpretation. Last month, a Seattle judge also temporarily blocked the order. The White House has appealed the case to the Ninth Circuit Court. There are also new concerns about the safety of border agents and military personnel at the southern border, and Mexican cartel leaders are behind that threat. Here's national correspondent Christine Frizzell.
Mexico's pledge to send 10,000 troops to the border coming as those on this side of the border are facing new threats. The New York Post reporting on an internal memo warning Mexican cartel leaders have authorized the use of drones equipped with explosives to be used against U.S. Border Patrol agents and military personnel.
They're going to try to do what they can to make these situations where the Border Patrol gets in trouble, Border Patrol agents are hurt, they're responding to other situations so that they can then get their smuggled goods across the border.
Former ICE Director John Fabricatore says it's not about waging war, but a likely response to a loss in profits. With the rapid rise of migrants from all around the world wanting help getting to the U.S. border, it's estimated cartels made about $13 billion a year on human smuggling alone, using tunnels like this one recently discovered in El Paso.
That tunnel goes into Ciudad Juarez, comes from Ciudad Juarez into El Paso sector area.
This drone, recovered from a smuggler back in 2023, contained video appearing to show cartels surveilling the movements and activity of migrants as well as Border Patrol agents. But the warnings about drone attacks could bring more urgency for the U.S. military to assist in border security efforts.
The military has, ground penetrating radar. They've got other things that they've been using over in Afghanistan to discover tunnels in Afghanistan that could be used on the border. The military also has technology to be able to knock those drones out of the air if they do come into our territory and actually hunt drones.
Since Donald Trump took office just a little more than 2 weeks ago and declared an emergency at the southern border, the number of encounters of migrants appears to have dropped dramatically, from between 1,200 and 1,400 per day during the final days of the Biden administration to between 600 and 700 a day more recently. I'm Christine Frizzell for the National News Desk.
The House holding a hearing on the state of education as President Trump vows to get rid of the whole department.
But this is just beginning, and it is disruptive. It will have to be to do the significant change.
That we will not go along with programs to dismantle our education system. We will fight any attempt to dismantle the department.
Democrats strongly oppose Trump's proposed executive actions on education. They argue that public schools, particularly low-income schools, will struggle. Supporters argue the department wastes taxpayer money and inserts the federal government into local decisions and ideologies.
American education is in crisis. For far too long, U.S. schools have focused on everything but educating children.
Trump needs Congress to approve most measures surrounding the education department. Developing now, President Trump says he wants big oil companies to drill more. They say that's not going to happen. According to the Wall Street Journal, oil execs are saying another oil boom won't happen even with regulations Trump intends to slash. The industry is now focused on keeping costs down and returning profits to shareholders. Trump's next option, lean on OPEC and ask for more barrels on the market. The Pentagon is putting together plans to withdraw all U.S. troops from Syria. That's according to NBC News. Officials are drawing up 30, 60, and 90-day options. There are around 2,000 troops in Syria based on December numbers. President Trump ordered the withdrawal from Syria in his first term, but received pushback from his defense secretary at the time. Most of the troops were eventually pulled, but quickly returned. Chinese AI app DeepSeek initially made headlines when it became the most downloaded app in January around the globe. Well, now it's making news for how it can expose you to the world. Joining Jan Jeffcoat to discuss is cybersecurity expert and privacy attorney Lisa Garber.
So this major security vulnerability has been discovered. Tell us what these cyber experts found and what this means for really the industry at large.
So interested cybersecurity and tech researchers have been attempting to poke holes in DeepSeek since it rose to fame in the past few weeks, and they found a variety of different problems, the most recent being a misconfiguration in something as simple as the cloud, the way that DeepSeek uses it. It actually exposed millions of records, including what people use as their input for the bot, and then also other sensitive information, how it works, secret keys, things like that.
So what can a user do to protect themselves?
This is unfortunately not something that is just to DeepSeek. We've seen American apps have similar issues. The problem here is DeepSeek's data, everything you put into that app or that platform is going back to China. Everything is held on Chinese servers, and it's all, even you can see this in the privacy policy, given to China, the People's Republic of China. So it's important to understand where the data is going that you're putting into these systems, whether it's DeepSeek or another that's based in the US. It's all being saved. It's being used to train these systems to get better, but it also means that it's not kept private. So don't put things into these systems that you wouldn't want others to see, especially as we're coming up on tax season. You're trying to figure numbers out. Don't put in sensitive information.
How does American AI stack up to this Chinese technology?
Well, there's quite a bit of hot debate about how much money has been invested, how many chips, things like that. It's a different type of model, especially because it's being thrown out into the world as open source, which means that you can download it for free and make adjustments to it. We're really in a huge battle right now to get to number one. But it's important to note that even though the numbers look different in terms of investment, the U.S. is making an important investment in a base ground for building AI technology. So while we see this DeepSeek rise to the top right now, that doesn't mean that they're at the top of the race.
Another big headline in tech this morning is the fact that a lot of newer cars are becoming more like computers, which of course brings another layer of safety concerns. Subaru, the latest to acknowledge it knows where you're going and it can unlock your car. What did it reveal about its Starlink system?
Yes, so we love our infotainment systems, right? The ability to have Wi-Fi in your vehicle and check your GPS, check the news, check all your apps and music. But the problem is it opens up scores of vulnerabilities for our personal data, including the GPS location. And Subaru revealed that it actually keeps your GPS location for a year, meaning that these records are accessible to various employees, and it's problematic. They patched some of these issues, but it's important to know that this isn't just a Subaru problem. We've seen it with other smart connected cars as well. Tesla, Mercedes-Benz have had issues where hackers have found vulnerabilities.
Cybersecurity expert and privacy attorney Lisa Garber, thanks for joining us this morning and sharing some of your expertise. We appreciate it.
State Farm is asking for an emergency interim rate hike in the wake of last month's wildfires that destroyed thousands of Los Angeles area homes. State Farm General says the hikes will average 22% for homeowners. The insurer says it has already received more than 8,700 claims from wildfire victims, and it's already paid more than $1 billion to policyholders. Back in May of 2023, State Farm said it would stop writing new policies in California altogether. Committed partners keeping monetary secrets. A new report reveals financial infidelity is on the rise. The National News Desk, Angelo Brown explains.
This may seem like a strange question, but what's worse, your partner or spouse keeping a secret credit card or cheating?
We found that almost half of Americans think that financial cheating is at least as bad as physical cheating. That's a really high, surprisingly high statistic.
A recent Bankrate survey revealing a staggering 40% of Americans married or in partnerships are guilty of financial infidelity, secretly splurging, stashing cash, or racking up debt without their partner's knowledge.
Technology is enabling some of this too, and it's why the percentages are rising over time.
Younger generations are more likely to keep a financial secret. A jaw-dropping 67% of Gen Z and 54% of millennials admit to financial deceit, compared to a more conservative 33% of Gen X and 30% of baby boomers.
People are getting married later, and they have their own incomes, and it's gotten increasingly difficult, I would say, to mesh that with someone else.
The nature of these financial portrayals varies, including overspending, the most common at 33%, hidden debt, 23% reporting they have racked up debt in secret, and then around 17% say they are keeping secret credit cards or secret accounts.
New research from Harvard, Cornell, and Yale found marriage rates for women without college degrees has gone down. Researchers found that corresponds to the uptick in men with declining incomes and higher rates of incarceration. Emma Withrow from the Fact Check team joining us now to talk about it. So as far as marriage rates in general go, what are the latest numbers on that?
Yeah, so marriage rates have really held steady since 2012, sitting at about 16.7%. That's all as of 2022, which are the latest numbers that we have available from the census.
Yeah, and obviously this is going to vary state by state. So tell us more about that, as well as the average divorce rate here in the U.S.
Yeah, so as far as the divorce rate goes, it's 7.1%, and the average marriage length that ends in divorce is 8 years. You can take a look at this map on your screen here. Vermont had the lowest divorce rate, and Wyoming and Arkansas actually had the highest divorce rates.
With regards to couples staying together more often now, it seems like
the timing factors into this.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what researchers are saying. So Professor Philip Cohen from the University of Maryland, he did an analysis on these declining divorce rates and said that millennials and Generation X are just more selective than previous generations and are actually getting married later in life. And so with that comes the smaller likelihood of getting divorced.
Oh, interesting. It's the relationship's evolving.
Yeah.
And priorities too, it seems like.
Yeah.
Thank you, Emma. All right, for more on this Fact Check Team topic, including links to their sources, scan the QR code on your screen or visit thenationaldesk.com.
So to come, our team of correspondents breaks down this week in Washington, from an overhaul of the federal government to potential funding cuts to sanctuary cities.
Welcome back. Our Washington Bureau covers the nation's capital every day, and our team of correspondents reports on the important issues facing the country and how they impact you. President Trump and Elon Musk working swiftly to try to overhaul the federal government, leading to protests from federal workers and from Democratic lawmakers. National correspondent Matt Galka, fill us in on what's happening.
Yeah, Steve, Elon Musk and the Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, are working at a breakneck speed, and they're saying this is what the voters wanted. They voted for President Donald Trump to shake up government, to upend the status quo. So far, we've reported on things they've done. They've gained access to multiple government agencies, payroll systems in some of them, some read-only access. And they also really pushed along this deadline, this buyout deadline for civilian federal workers, that they could accept basically a payment option that they would defer resignation until September. They'd get paid essentially for the next 8 months if they decided to leave their jobs. Now, 60,000 people had taken that option before what was supposed to be a Thursday night deadline. And the ultimatum there was that if you didn't take that, well, there would probably be layoffs coming after that, so you might not get the money after all. Well, a federal judge has temporarily delayed this potentially career-altering decision for a lot of federal employees to Monday and possibly even beyond, as they explore if this downsizing of government is even legal. But the bottom line is this. DOGE and Elon Musk are working very fast. They apparently have a lot of support from the White House and Republicans. And you mentioned the pushback. Democrats and some of these unions, they're starting to push back, and they're basically saying Elon Musk was not elected. He shouldn't have this much power as an unelected official. And they're going to do as many things as possible to stop this disruption from happening. But maybe it'll ultimately be up to the courts to decide what he can and can't do.
Well, speaking of overhauls, President Trump's new Attorney General started this past week and is already implementing big changes. National correspondent Kayla Gaskins, tell us about that.
Yeah, Steve, Pam Bondi wasting no time getting to work, overhauling the Justice Department. And this is exactly what she was brought in to do. So within 24 hours of getting sworn in, Steve, Pam Bondi issuing 14 different directives to get the DOJ in line with the vision Trump campaigned on and the reason why he installed her in this position. So some of those directives were ending DEI in the DOJ, stopping federal funding to sanctuary cities, as well as creating a task force to look at prosecuting Hamas for the crimes against Jews on October 7th. She also is looking to end fair admission practices, or she wants to make sure that they are ensuring fair admission practices at universities. But she set up another task force to look at the weaponization of the federal government, specifically taking a deep dive into those legal cases against Donald Trump. So I talked with a former U.S. attorney, John Fishwick, and he said Jack Smith and the people involved in these cases, maybe they should be a little worried. Hopefully they crossed all their T's and dotted all of their I's in these investigations, because right now Pam Bondi and her Department of Justice are going to go through every single email, every single text message, every single step that's on record and make sure that everything is in line. Now, Donald Trump has been very critical of the Justice Department, seeing it as going against not just him, but just Republicans in general. So what we should get from these Pam Bondi-led investigations is maybe some answers into that. Steve.
And Kayla, you mentioned Bondi's move to cut off federal funds to so-called sanctuary cities. Those are cities that have promised to protect illegal immigrants. National correspondent Christine Frizzau. Bondi's action and the administration's aggressive deportation approach putting a lot of focus on Democratic elected officials who have promised to stand up to the Trump administration. Tell us more.
Yeah, that's right. And those promises have already been followed with action. Within hours of becoming Attorney General, she filed a lawsuit against the city of Chicago and the state of Illinois, fighting back against the sanctuary laws, which she says are against the law. They have declared a national emergency at the southern border. And this came out just hours after a memo was released to the Department of Justice directing the DOJ to cut off federal funds to any state and local jurisdictions that interfere with federal law enforcement activities. Within that memo, it also talked about taking away funding from non-governmental organizations that assist undocumented migrants, and also pursuing legally some of these places. So that is already happening, and this comes as the mayors of Boston, New York, Denver, and Chicago have all said that they will testify before Congress, before a House committee, about these laws. You know, initially these laws came about from these regions that have a lot of migrants to protect them. They wanted to make sure that these people felt comfortable coming forward to the police if they were in danger or somebody in their community was in danger, and not risk their status, not risk being arrested themselves. Well, one of the things in these laws, though, is it said that local law enforcement could not work with federal law enforcement. We are starting to see a lot of people, including Governor Hochul and Mayor Eric Adams of New York, backtrack a little bit, saying, you know what, if there are criminals, we want them out too.
Right, and all of this just scratching the surface of all the news coming out of this new Trump administration. You three are all over it. We'll be watching your reports. Thanks for your hard work. Christine, Kayla, and Matt, back to you.
Up next, honoring the sacrifice of first responders after deadly West Coast wildfires. The state proposing tax breaks for firefighters as a thanks for their service. And deportation deployment. Hundreds of Marines heading to Guantanamo Bay. The operation to remove migrants who committed crimes from the country. This is the National News Desk, America's News Now. We have reporters all across the country in your neighborhoods covering issues that matter to you. From tax breaks for first responders in Oregon to an ex-high school basketball coach facing jail time in Washington State. We're taking the pulse of America. But we start with Marines in North Carolina being deployed to Guantanamo Bay.
We are going to Guantanamo Bay to complete the mission that was given to us.
That mission being support for the Department of Defense and Department of Homeland Security's mission to expand the Migrant Operations Center at Guantanamo Bay's Naval Station.
This is what we train for. At a moment's notice, we get the call. Like I said, we were in the field training for something like this, and it happened. We stay ready, and we're ready to go, and here we are.
Eventually, we knew we'd get that call. That call came down, so here we are getting ready to do the job.
Marines boarded the plane. The plane was loaded, and off they went.
Just making sure that everybody on this plane comes back home and we can get the job done, make America proud.
It took all of one day for a jury to convict Jacob Jackson, with prosecutors successfully arguing that this prominent former basketball coach was actually a predator.
I was 14 years old. 14 when things first started.
Jackson Cummings was one of at least 8 young athletes terrorized by Jackson. He says this verdict is vindication.
Just feels like the weight was lifted off my shoulders. Feels like I can start a new chapter, turn the page.
Jackson was found guilty on 19 counts of sex crimes, including for rape of a child, sexual misconduct with a child, and kidnapping.
Justice was served today, and justice is going to keep getting served in the future for everybody else who makes bad decisions.
Senate Bill 545 creates a $1,000 tax credit for Oregon volunteer firefighters. It has support from both sides of the aisle, one lawmaker calling the credit a recognition of the work volunteer firefighters do and have done.
Senate Bill 545 is a great opportunity to show our volunteer firefighters how critical they are to Oregon's emergency response system and how very much we appreciate them.
According to the Oregon Volunteer Firefighters Association, there are 8,760 volunteer firefighters across the state. Those in favor of the tax credit hope that it will aid in the recruitment and retention of volunteers in Oregon.
This by no means will make anyone wealthy or financially sound, but it may help alleviate a small financial burden and encourage more people to hear the call to service.
Well, if you are up late to watch the big game, you might need an extra boost of caffeine. How you can get a free coffee from Starbucks Monday morning. The Grand Canyon took millions of years to form, but new research suggests 2 Grand Canyon-sized valleys on the moon formed in just 10 minutes. The massive canyons are on the far side of the moon that faces away from Earth. Scientists say they were formed 3.8 billion years ago when an object slammed into the moon. NASA's Artemis 3 mission aims to land humans in the same spot late next year. The day after Super Bowl Sunday, you can recover from your late night with a free coffee from Starbucks. Listen to this. The chain offering 1 free tall, hot, or iced brewed coffee to its reward members all day Monday. And if you aren't a rewards member yet, you can sign up Monday and still get a freebie. The move comes as the company rebrands after disappointing sales last quarter. And that's going to be all for us on the weekend edition of the National News Desk, America's News Now. Don't forget, you can catch us live from 6 a.m. to 11 a.m. and 10 p.m. to midnight Eastern Time. Check your local listings. And you can also watch us online and catch up with the latest headlines on thenationaldesk.com. Thanks for watching the weekend edition of the National News Desk. I'm Dee Dee Gatton. And from all of us here, have a great week.